Okay, welcome to episode 9 of the JOBCAST, the Employment Support Team's podcast aimed at helping you build the skills and confidence to find work. I'm Dan.
I'm Cheska.
And I'm Dimitra.
So in this episode we're going to be discussing job interviews and things like preparing for interviews and common questions that you might be asked.
September is also when International Happiness at Work Week takes place, so we'll be talking about what makes us happy at work and the things that you can do to look after your well-being in the workplace.
So, thinking about job interviews, and I think one of the things that I hear a lot is people will say, why do I have to do a job interview? And it's something that we think about a lot with the work we're doing with clients, and actually there's a lot of reasons, there's sort of pros and cons to it. So the main reason you have an interview is employers want to kind of make sure that you're the right person for the job. They want to find out more about you and kind of meet the person behind the application form.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think with the application form, you're selling your skills, but actually sometimes it's also about making sure that people fit in, so personalities and things. And I always say that actually getting interviews is the hardest part, because selling yourself on paper is one thing, but then it's about being in the room. So you're still selling yourself, but I think it then gives people the ability to kind of see how you might fit in with the team and things. And there's, obviously there's lots of different types of interviews as well. So, now I think most people have experienced an online interview, which personally I think are more terrifying than face-to-face interviews. But obviously, with the pandemic and things, that's what most people were doing. But what do you guys think? Do you think online interviews are more scary than face-to-face?
Technical issues is a big thing, but I wouldn't necessarily say that makes it more scary. If anything, people might feel more comfortable, being in their own home, instead of having to go to this big, imposing building, and it can be a bit intimidating. So I think on one side that might be preferable for some people, maybe.
Yeah, I think I miss body language and that eye contact.
Yeah,
I think for me that's. I know then if I can see those things, that's what kind of grounds me, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm on the right track, I'm saying the right things.
Yeah.
For me, when I'm actually interviewing people, a virtual interview is quite good because we take notes and you can kind of do that, and you're not kind of looking away and having the right. It's a lot easier for me, I guess. So I think from an employer's perspective, it's probably a lot easier. We can get more people in, they can do it more efficiently. I think that'll probably be the way forward. I think we'll see a lot more virtual interviews going forward. I
think you're right. I mean, my dad used to work abroad and things, so a lot of his job interviews and things were sort of online before the days of Zoom as well. So I think he was using Skype. So we really are kind of looking at going back. But yeah, and I also think, the other thing to think about is the different types of interviews that employers might offer. So you've got your competency-based interviews, where, your opportunity to really show what your experience is and how you meet the competencies in the job description. But there's also, behavioural interviews, there's practical interviews. I'm a big fan of practical interviews, especially for people who maybe aren't as confident, and being in a room, being interviewed by people actually is quite a scary thing, but actually get them to go and do the job and show their competency.
It's also with a practical interview anyway, I feel like it's definitely less intimidating, and you're also, as an employee, potential employee, you're getting a chance to try out the job and see, oh, actually, yeah, this is what I want to do, or this isn't for me. Kind of gauge whether you fit into, that workplace and whether that's something that you would like to continue doing.
Yeah, and that's a really important part, isn't it? And certainly when we're talking to clients, it's about reminding them that it's not just them being interviewed, they're interviewing their potential employer as well, because it's you know, it might be their dream job, and then you might be interviewed by a new manager, and you just think, oh, I don't like you.
It's a two-way thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more people remember that, the more confident it can make them. What's your experience around sort of group interviews?
I had one way back before I started my apprenticeship at the council. I had an interview for another apprenticeship with a provider who shall remain nameless, and that was a group interview, and that was very very strange. I think for me as well, it was one of the first interviews I've ever had for anything, so I didn't really know what the alternative was, and it was only a small group, but I remember I found it very strange. Didn't know whether it was trying to find that balance. If you don't want to be too quiet, but then you don't want to be too overpowering either. And so that was interesting, and some more pressure in some ways, because it's not just the interviewers listening to what you're saying. It's the other candidates. So there's a little bit more pressure, I think. With that.
I was going to say, did it feel almost like a bit more competitive and like you were being put to the lead situation?
In a way, yeah, because you see what you're up against. You knew who else was answering and who else was in the running, and you kind of, even though you don't consciously do it, you're always thinking, oh, that was a good answer, I wish I'd said that, and that kind of throws you off a little bit as well. But you can also bounce off of other people. You know, you can show how you fit in with that sort of team dynamic and sort of using stuff that they say. So in some ways it's a little bit, you know, they might trigger a thought, you remember something, I'll build on that. So it can work in your favour as well. Yeah,
my experience was I supported somebody in a group interview, and that was lots and lots of people sat literally on each other's laps, and it felt very, very uncomfortable. There was too many people in the room. This was before COVID. Yeah, absolutely. It'd be the 2-metre rule now. But I think it was really, really intimidating for the individual that I was supporting, and very overwhelming. But I could see the reason why the employer did it, because actually through standing there doing their spiel, they needed to do it once rather than doing it, you know, 20, 30 times. My experience was, it was the first time I'd driven out of Southampton, and I had to go down to Weymouth, and it was a group interview. It was for to do something with social care, but it was a 2-day selection process. So I had to stay in a B&B in Weymouth. I was very young, and my car only just about got me there. But it was also, we were using Weymouth Prison as where we were kind of meeting and everything. So the whole experience was really quite overwhelming for me as a 19-year-old. But what I found in the room, like you say, I was kind of sat there thinking I'm not as experienced as them, and I can't say that. But the other thing that I wasn't confident about doing then that I am now is because of my hearing impairment, I lost out on loads. I was really aware that I wasn't speaking up as much as I wanted to, because I didn't want to sound stupid in case someone else had said that. And during like the group activities that they had us doing and stuff, again, there were so many different groups in this big room, and I was having to lip read, and I knew that I was missing stuff, and I really found it overwhelming. And I didn't feel at the time empowered enough to say, I'm really sorry, I can't hear what's going on, this is what I need from you. So I found it really overwhelming, and I think the reason that I'm telling that story is because if there is anybody who's listening to this who does have any form of a disability, to speak up, because actually that held me back for years. You know, I've only had hearing aids for the last sort of 5 years, and now I wish I'd done it so much earlier, and it wasn't for any other reason other than I had good coping strategies. But when I think about that group interview, my coping strategies let me down. But it was a really busy, overwhelming time, and 2 days was just really hard.
Intense,
but I did get through. I just decided that it wasn't the right job for me after all of that. But you know, it's an experience I think that most people have to go through. But yeah, and I think going back to the competency interviews, which is what we currently do within the council, I think there's real value to kind of opening it up and almost having like a hybrid model, because I think competency interviews are really good, but I think also there's you run the risk almost of losing out and finding out more about the individual and things. But yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? But I see why interviews are important. I personally love interviews as long as they're not internal, and that's both as an interviewer and an interviewee. I really find internal interviews very challenging, very difficult, but external, I quite embrace them. So yeah, so then there's things to consider. So preparing for an interview, it's quite bizarre really. Yesterday I had a client phone up who I supported 16 years ago. I've worked very closely with them, and she phoned me up and said, I've got a job interview for a job that I really, really want, and I'm really anxious, so can you talk to me about it? And this young lady doesn't live in Southampton anymore, but she knows that I still have the same work mobile number. So every now and then I get phone calls. So actually, you know, I sat there and I did about half an hour just sort of reminding her of all of the stuff that she knew, but she really wanted this job. So, you know, we talked around looking at the job description and the personal specification, where her skills were really strong, or they weren't quite so strong. But then we also talked about the research into the business, and she reminded me, under no uncertain terms, that she had very good teachers, because it wasn't just me who worked with her, and that of course she'd done that. So I felt like I got a bit of a slap on the wrist with that. But again, that's really important, and we hear so often, don't we, about how many people got the job because they've just taken that time out to look at the company. And
I think it's important to kind of get to know their company values, what they're looking for, what they're working towards. I think it's really important to, like you said, just take a bit of extra time out and do that, because that could be the thing that gets you the job in the end. And it's research in general, I think.
One of the most important parts of preparing for an interview is doing that research, and I think it's, you know, not just looking at researching. People often find these websites where you can look at previous interview questions and try and guess what they might be asked, but it's more to it than that. It's doing that research into the company, finding out, you know, about them, and being able to quote stuff like their values, their mission statements. I've had clients in the past who have done that research. They've just gone on the company website and looked at about us, and they've reeled some of that off, and that's really impressed the interviewer, because they've taken that time to do that, and that's going to show the interviewer they've not just applied for 100 different jobs in the hope that someone is going to get back to them, but they've actually dedicated that time, they've committed to that company. And again, that's saying an awful lot without actually saying anything.
And also, on the flip side, you might read the values and the philosophy and just think, this is not a company I want to work for. So actually, you could save yourself stress and angst by deciding that actually this is not the right company for you.
It's the same thing we were talking about a few minutes ago. It's a two-way thing. It's not just do they want you to work for them, it's do you want to actually work for them in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. Going to sort of put you on the spot a little bit, but you did research into our team and things before.
Yeah, I did. I was given about 3 or 4 different placements, and I kind of had to apply for them, but I knew that this was my favourite one. I'd done the research. I thought, oh, actually this stuff looks really interesting. I'm genuinely passionate about the stuff that I would have to do in this job role. So yeah, it really is a TV thing.
Yeah, no, it makes so much difference as an interviewer. Even if some of the stats that you get given are slightly off or whatever else, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that they've taken the time to just go and find out.
Yeah.
And even if they don't have all of the experience that we're looking for me, knowing that they'll put themselves out just a little bit actually screams values to me. It shows that they are a bit proactive and that you know they're willing to go that extra mile.
Yeah, they're not just sat and, like Dan said, just applying for a bunch of different jobs. They've actually gone out their way to kind of, you know, find out a bit more about what the company's looking for.
Yeah.
I always remember when I applied to be an employment officer, I went online and I found a presentation that you did 10 years ago and was quoting bits of that to you. I remember that.
Yeah, that's. I can't believe you told me that in the end, but it was only about 2 years ago, I think. Yeah, and you know, it's about being creative and finding stuff, isn't it? So I think also making sure that you feel ready, like sort of dressed, and you know what you're going to wear, plan what you're going to wear. I mean, for me, for those of you who know me, I plan everything around my shoes, so my shoes are the starting point and then everything else fits in. But it's about making sure that you're presentable.
Yeah.
And you know, that doesn't have to be a really expensive suit. And you know, we're not talking about that. But what we are talking about is maybe not rocking up in sort of tracksuit bottoms and a hoodie. Because we've seen clients go for interviews like that. But I think also if you dress well and you're smart and everything else, then you feel kind of more confident.
Yeah, definitely.
And it just, again, you know, I can't remember what the time is. It's something like within 20 seconds, somebody's made up their mind about you. And as much as we don't want to be judgmental,
First impressions.
First impressions really do count. And you know, there's lots of ways around looking really smart. It's, you know, you don't have to go out and buy something new. I mean, there's your charity shops have got loads of really good stuff that you can pick up, and you know, there's the clothes banks as well that we've got in the city. We're really lucky. And there's also, you know, there's other funds that people can tap into for a bit of help too. So.
And like you say, it doesn't have to be all singing and dancing. It's just, it's making that effort, showing that you want this, and there's, you know, you answer the questions in an interview, but you can use so much other things that are non-verbal that show that dedication and that drive that you really want it, and you know, just dressing, I'd say not in a flash suit, but just putting in that effort, that's a really big thing as well.
Yeah, I feel like just looking put together, like you said, it not only makes you feel more confident, but I feel like it also makes you feel part of the team, right? Like you're dressing for the part that you want, which I think is a really important aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, just personal presence just is so important. And you know, just it's amazing how a white shirt, a black skirt, or black trousers, and brushed hair. You know, you can look really presentable like that. It's not about having to go out. So yeah, I do think clothes and personal presentation is so important. And silly things like, you know, making sure your nails are clean, and especially if you're sort of working within. So I'll never forget, there was a client years and years ago. Took them for an interview, and they wanted to work in a kitchen at an after school class. Yeah, great clothes, great makeup, hair all brushed and everything else, and then we were sat waiting for them to go in to the interview, and I just glanced down at the hands, and there was dirt. She'd been doing gardening, and so there was dirt behind the nails. I was just like, no. But you know, it's just about thinking, you know, like that. And if you're going for a, I don't know, a mechanic's job, you're gonna, like, oil just does not come out from behind the nails. And if you're going to be a builder or whatever else, then that's, you know, it's fine. But it's just about making an effort.
Yeah.
So and not having that last minute cigarette still outside.
Yeah.
Just remembering that, you know, mints don't cover it, perfume doesn't cover it, or aftershave, or deodorant, whatever people might want to use. Yeah, and travelling.
Travel plan's a big thing for me. I'm someone who very much, I have to know exactly where I've got to go, what door it is, what it looks like, how I'm going to get there, how I'm going to get home. So yeah, I think whether it's Google Maps or actually doing a trial run, it's worth doing because it's one less thing to worry about on the day, and it's something you can control as well. How you're going to get there, knowing where you've got to go. That's something that's in your control, and that's a known factor, and that's going to help you feel more confident.
Also, less stress. If you're stressing last minute about the bus or train or whatever, that is really not going to help you in that situation. You might already be quite anxious about the interview itself. And speaking of Google Maps, make sure your phone is charged, I would say, just in case. If you are going quite a bit out of the way to go somewhere, I would definitely say have your phone charged, but obviously turn your phone off in the actual interview.
Yeah, and you know, that actually makes perfect sense, because if you are stuck in traffic or something happens, because, you know, life does happen. I've attended an interview an hour late with somebody else's blood on me because they'd had an accident, and I just happened to be the unlucky person that was sat in the car as it happened. And, you know, I managed to phone them after the individual had been taken away by the ambulance and things, and, you know, just sort of said, oh, I'm really sorry, this is why I'm late, I couldn't phone at the time. And they still invited me for interview, but I also had to tell them I'm not quite looking as I was with my laddered tights and, you know, sort of additional red to my outfit. But it's just about being able to phone and just say, look, I know that my interview was at this time. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late. And yeah, just I'm being safe as well. And making sure that if you drive and you have to do like on-street parking, make sure that you've either got the change or make sure that you've got your card, so that if it doesn't take change, because now you have just card meters and things. So it's just being aware.
It's minimising the stress, isn't it? And less things to be worrying about. And that's kind of, if you've got a virtual interview as well, you don't necessarily have to travel, but you still want to make sure that your Wi-Fi's working, your device is fully charged.
And you know how to use the platform. So my interview that I had for my apprenticeship, I'd never used before, and so their company set up like kind of like workshops where you weren't learning anything, you literally used the link to kind of drop in, you got to talk to somebody, you got to navigate, understand how to share a screen, that type of thing. So just, and you know, practice with somebody in the family or friend. So but I think, I mean, there's lots of stuff to think about with preparation, and some people like to make lists, so, you know, and making sure that you've got all of your certificates and your evidence, so your right to work. You know, personally, maybe it's because I'm a little bit obsessed with making sure that everything's in order, but I have everything in a folder, I make sure it's by the door, you know, it's all ready to go the day before the interview, so that I'm not running around.
That's another psychological boost, isn't it? That you think, look at all that stuff I've got, and it's there, it's ready.
And remember to take your notes as well. Because if you sat down and made notes, might as well take them and use them. You know, because actually when you are anxious and you're excited, hopefully, about the job interview and things, you might forget stuff. So at least if you sat waiting to be pulled in, you've got your notes, you can sort of remind yourself of what you've said in your application, but also, you know, any of the research that you've done.
So when you're doing that preparation and after you've prepared, you then start thinking about actually how you're going to succeed in the interview and those things around, you know, what makes a good interview. So something that I think one of the most important things we've sort of touched on it already, but I think the body language element of whether you're in a physical interview or a virtual interview, your body language says so much. I can't remember the stat. I should know with the amount of employability courses I've done, but it's a quite high percentage actually of how you communicate is all non-verbal. It's done through sort of the gestures, your tone of voice, facial expressions, and all of that. It can say a lot, again, without speaking. So just being aware, and people will get a little bit caught up on it sometimes. People will panic about, worrying about always making eye contact and having to sit bolt upright. But it's not necessarily that. It's just that awareness, thinking, what's my body language saying? What am I saying? Is it contradicting what's coming out of my mouth? And just that awareness, really.
Yeah. I think also in general, just thinking about what you're going to say, and if you're asked a question and you're panicking a bit, you can always ask them to kind of repeat the question, because at the end of the day, you do need to answer what they're asking. So you can take a breath, take a sip of water maybe, and just say, could you please repeat the question? Because it is allowed, and I think in the moment people just get so caught up in their nerves that they forget, and they might end up rambling on about something that's not related or something like that.
Yeah, you don't have to be perfect. I think that's the thing, is that, and quite often interviewers are just as nervous as the interviewees, but for different reasons. And you don't know who's interviewing you, as in, you don't know if it's the first time they've ever interviewed someone.
Yeah.
You don't know if actually for them this is a really big thing, because they've got their own anxiety. So nobody expects us to be perfect. I think all they expect is for you to be genuine and open. But for me, I read body language lots, and eye contact. I really like eye contact. It doesn't have to be like a staring contest, but just that kind of that regular check-in.
Yeah.
For me, that makes me feel like the other person's engaged.
Yeah.
And they're comfortable in my presence. I think that's quite important.
Showing that you're listening. And I always say to my clients that the interview's it's not a memory test. It's not about reciting everything you've read and all of your CV, but it's a conversation. It's about you and how you're going to fit in, and what you can do for the company, what the company can do for you, and actually approaching it that way give you a lot more confidence. So actually, it's not an interrogation; it's a conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And then STAR, I love STAR. So when you're certainly asked like a situational sort of interview question, so there's questions with, can you give us an example when? The STAR kind of really helps to just make sure that you tick all the boxes. Although I personally like to add on an extra R, and that's not because I can't spell, but thinking about and explaining the situation. So what was happening at the time, what the situation was. Then you talk about your particular task, so that would normally relate to what they're asking you to describe an example of. The action that you took, so what you did, what impact that had on the person or the customer or whatever, and the result. So then talk about how it all ended. My extra R is then to talk about the reflection, because I think reflection is an amazing tool. I'm probably over reflective on a lot of things, but if you can then show the interviewer how you've reflected and what you might have done differently or better, because we don't always make the right decisions when you're put on the spot and something's happening, but then if you're able to then show that you have that ability to reflect, then that's a big plus, isn't it? Because
I think, being able to, be a bit critical of yourself as well is a good skill, I think, because it does help us improve. And I think that if you can show whoever's interviewing you that you can actually do that, it's a transferable skill that you can put towards, working there. So I think it's great.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, self-awareness is so important.
I think what I always say as well is, when you're answering the question, you've got to give examples. So what I try and do is actually use the job description and person specification. A lot of people associate that with the application process, writing your application form, but actually use that for the interview as well, because that's probably going to be the criteria they'll be marking against. So I try and think of examples for each point, time where maybe I've done it, or perhaps what I would do, or if I need to develop in that particular area. And I know I'm not going to be asked every single question, but at least, again, that confidence, knowing that if you are asked about that, you've got that example in the back of your mind that you can go to. So definitely use those examples.
Different examples as well.
Yeah.
There was one interview that I did years ago, and it was literally the same situation, the same kind of thing. And it was really clear that they were just using that one. So in the back of my head, I was like, actually, how much experience of this have you got? At least if you're talking about different experiences and different job roles or whatever, it just shows that there's more to you.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important.
And those examples don't have to come from paperwork either.
No.
They can come from your personal life, caring responsibilities, voluntary work, all of those transferable skills. They're just as valid as being from paperwork. So don't be afraid to use those as well and talk about those.
And a really common one that we come across is, well, I have never worked and I've just had a family. I've been bringing up my family. I've got no experience. I've got no skills. No, we have thousands of skills. So those transferable skills around, juggling everything. So finance, time management, multitasking, all of those things are just so key to any job role. So, it's about, I guess that's our role. That's probably why we love it so much, is that, we can then start reminding people about how amazing they are, even though they haven't worked in a paid employment way. They've actually worked really hard bringing up their families.
Definitely. And what about when they ask, have you got any questions for us?
I love it when I'm asked a question. I think if people don't ask a question, I think you're not interested and you're not taking it seriously.
Yeah. I think in an interview there should be something that you're, maybe something you're not sure about, or something that you're interested in about the company. So, for example, team size or kind of upcoming projects, anything like that, because it's all to help you. It's knowledge that will help you. So I think you should just, take a minute to breathe after the main part of the interview is done, and then just think, is there anything that I want to know about where I might potentially be going to work? Because like you said, it doesn't only show that you're interested, but it's also something that can benefit you. So yeah, definitely ask questions.
I always suggest writing them down as well. Try and think about before the interview what you might ask, and write it down, because I'm terrible for it. If I haven't got something written down, I'll forget. So especially after all of that kind of stressful interview, and you're glad it's over, and then they say, have you got any questions, and you go blank. So actually, if they're written in front of you, that can be really useful.
Yeah, and a really good question to be able to get the interviewer to open up and think is, what's your favourite thing about your job, or how, tell me about a typical day in this job role, that type of thing. Because actually, the one thing that people are really good at is talking about themselves. Yeah. So it's almost kind of encouraging them to open up a little bit more for you to make that judgment as well, because you're still interviewing and you're still making up your mind whether it's the right job role for you.
Yeah. I get asked quite a lot, what's my favourite thing about working.
What do you say?
It's really difficult, to be honest. I have to take a lot of time to think. No. I have my own go-tos as well.
Of course.
So it's always sort of just, for me, it's the diversity of the job, and nothing's ever the same.
Yeah, definitely. God, I can't mix that one now when we're both interviewing together.
So yeah, happiness at work. When we were researching for this episode, we found out that the 20th to 26th of September is the International Week of Happiness at Work. So with that in mind, what makes us happy at work, and what can people in companies do to be happy at work?
That's a big thing we're looking at actually at the moment with the PAST project we're working on. So for those of you that didn't catch, I think it was episode 5, our PAST themed podcast, which you should definitely go back and listen to if you haven't.
Yeah.
But PAST is our project around perinatal mental health. So supporting families, mums, dads, grandparents, anyone in the family, sort of who've had a baby, and so we do a lot of stuff around employment on that project. And actually, one of the things we found from talking to employers, employees, different organisations, was that actually being happy at work can make a big difference. And so we've been talking a lot about the different things people can do, and you know, people always associate, when you ask that question, the first thing people think of is, oh, you've got a pool table in the staff room and you've got a meditation area, but it doesn't have to be stuff like that, does it? It can just be, you know, that flexibility, and you know, being able to go and take a break from the screen for a bit, or going out for a walk. We're really lucky in the city centre, we can go for a walk around the parks, but it's that kind of stuff, just around enjoying going to work.
I think also just getting to know the people that you're working with. It's, you know, you're forming connections there, and it's not something that should just be overlooked, because it can honestly help, especially in the beginning of the job. If you're feeling quite nervous, you start to talk to people that you're working with. It's something nice to look forward to when you go to work every night. So I think that's another thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just sort of thinking about the different things that one can do. Like most people who are working full time will spend an incredibly long time with their work. And you know, whilst that can be wonderful, getting to know them is really great, but also sometimes having that time out and that time away. So with that in mind, you know, it's no secret. I'm a big fan of going to the art gallery. So if I just need some time out, or just feel like I can't cope with talking to anyone else anymore, I take myself off to the art gallery, have a wander around, get into my head, look at some beautiful artwork, and I come back and I feel so much better. So it's whatever works for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is important to take those breaks. You know, especially since working with computers and screens and stuff, I think it's nice to kind of stretch your legs, get away from the screen and give your eyes a rest, and just get some fresh air. And yeah, I think that is really important. So I know a lot of people kind of, in a way, they're too proud to take breaks. I think they want to be really hard working, keep on slogging on. But I think it is really important for happiness, mental health, physical health as well, just to take that break whenever you need it.
And productivity, you know, there's so much research out there that shows that actually if you take regular breaks and things, your productivity is so much better. And that includes not just being in the office. I think is really important, but you know, there are more people working from home now, and working from home is just as stressful, if not more stressful in some ways. And you know, it's about ensuring that you take those regular breaks. And, you know, even if it's when you're working from home, even if you then sort of think, actually, I'm going to go out in the garden, I'm going to hang the washing out, take the dog for a walk, whatever it is, it's just being away from work and allowing your brain to have that downtime.
I would say as well, you know, it goes back to the interviews and interviewing the employer as well as yourself being interviewed. But when you're looking for work, actually thinking, is this job going to make you happy? Are you going to get something from this job? And life's too short just to do a job for the sake of a job. It's got to be something that you know, you might not enjoy it, but actually, is it rewarding? Are you getting something from it? Can you see the difference you're making? And that's so important from the sense of being happy at work.
Definitely. I actually didn't take a job, but it was my dream job. It was amazing. It was up in London, working for a youth charity, but it was all around engaging youth through art and music, and it was just perfect job for me. But I just got, you know, just rented a place with then boyfriend, and it was a case of, oh, that's okay, I can travel to London every day, loads of people commute, it would be fun. And I did the commute, and it was fine. It was quite a long sort of day, but it was doable. And then the interview went really well, and then they sort of said, you know, we want you to relocate. And I sort of said, well, I don't really need to, I can do it, it's fine. And they said no, because actually the commuting will take too much time for you, you'll be burnt out too quickly. And I was really upset, because I think I had a big chance of getting the job. And it was on the journey back that I realised, after having the stress of the interview and everything else, actually it would have been too much. And again, I would have spent so much time just literally sat on the train. So although it felt like the ideal job, it wasn't the ideal place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes we do have to have kind of a talk with ourselves and think, because there's a lot of situations where I know people are thinking, oh, this is a dream job, this is what I'm like destined to do, and then it turns out that for some reason it's not. And I think we just have to take that step back and reflect on it, and just kind of think, no, you know what I mean? Just because it is difficult, especially when, like you said, it would have been an amazing job for you that really suited you and you really enjoy it, but there are just some things, unfortunately, sometimes that happen that just means that it is gonna, you know, affect us in a bad way, which is unfortunate, but it happens.
And we're really lucky in council, we've got loads of wellbeing initiatives and stuff going on. And you know, things like the walking sessions and the yoga sessions and things, they're starting back up again now. Which is really good. But I think it's about, for me, as an employer, I think it's about having lots of different options open for people to be able to tap in and out of, because you're never going to give everybody exactly what they want. But, you know, even just our flexible working approach allows people to be able to just sort of work it around themselves.
Yeah, I think it's great that there's always an option. It's not, I mean, it's one of the great places, the great points about working for the council is, you know, it's got that element of flexibility. So if you feel like you might, you know, need a break from social gatherings or whatever, and you feel like I need to take a day at home, get my work done, and then the next day you come in, you socialise. I think that's really great that, you know, that's an option. And I know that isn't an option for everyone, but I think that even taking time after work to maybe do something on your own or do something with friends, yeah, I think that there should be a really good balance between kind of, you know, work and life.
Yeah, the hybrid working, I think, is definitely ticking a lot of boxes for a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Work-life balance is so important. That's something we'll talk about next month, actually, for National Work-Life Week. But right now, though, we're going to have a chat about his experiences of interviews and what makes him happy at work.
So first off, a big thank you to our own Chris Brown, who works for Southampton City Council as a Community Cohesion Manager. We really appreciate you being on this month's JOBCAST. Would you just like to properly introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your job?
Yeah, my name is Chris Brown. I'm the Community Cohesion Manager, and that involves a lot of different parts within there. So it's around hate crime, it's about violence reduction, It's about working with the community to find out what they want. A lot of my role is working with young people, really interested in our future generations, getting their voices and making sure that those voices influence what we do.
So I just have a few questions for you. First question is, what do you look for when you interview someone?
Firstly, for the application form, that they've read what we've put out and have responded to it. So it's not a generic CV. A CV can be great because it can cover what you've done. But when someone's responded specifically and matched themselves against the criteria that have gone out in the job advert, that's really useful because you're directly showing about how your skills, knowledge, expertise, evidence fits the role that we are advertising.
Yeah, it's just about putting in a bit more extra effort to kind of find out specifically what the company
Definitely.
wants.
So if we're asking a question around organisational ability, if you've done something that showcases that, so you've run a project, it could be that you've done some fundraising organisation for a society at university that you've been involved with, something like that. It shows you how you've managed that process. So that's really valuable to say, okay, we know this applicant has done that. It might be in a different field, in a different role, but there is organisational evidence. So that's really useful to have that proper tailored application rather than a generic CV.
I think it's also the fact that a lot of skills can be, used in different areas. They're quite transferable as well, aren't they?
Definitely. And I had somebody on an interview the other day worried that they were using examples from a few years ago. And for me, good examples are good examples. It doesn't have to necessarily be yesterday. It could be in a job you did 2 years ago. But if it's a good example about, again, just using organisational abilities, it's a good example. But understanding how you translate that through to the job which you're applying for is really important, and understand how that can match that, because that's really valuable. An employer wants to see you've got the skills that they're looking for, and to relate what you've done to what we're looking for in our job advert is key, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So we know that job interviews can tend to make a lot of people feel quite nervous, but how do you as an employer feel when you're interviewing someone?
Genuinely, I'm really interested to hear the responses. I've done hundreds, if not thousands, of interviews over the years for selection processes, for job adverts, and having somebody who is engaging and telling a different story and different experiences is really interesting. So I'm quite intrigued. I don't view it as a sort of a burden to do. I want to get the right person for the job, and I'm really interested in finding the right person for the job. So I always look forward to them, because you always find out some really good examples of things that people have done previously, and then you can understand how those can plug into the role that we've advertised.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine it to be quite interesting, because obviously you will be meeting lots and lots of different people from all walks of life. And in terms of kind of advice or maybe tips, is there anything that you could maybe say to anyone with an interview coming up?
I think if you're applying, say you're applying to an organisation like the City Council, have a look at the website, understand some of the current issues for the council. If you know anybody that works in the place, ask them, say what's going on there. But no one expects you to have an in-depth knowledge of absolutely everything. But if you can talk about some of the things that you've done as research, I think they help understand. And always be honest on an interview, so prepare for that. If you don't understand a question, if you don't have an answer, be honest about it, and be prepared for that. So if I'm preparing for an interview, because I still have to go through interviews occasionally myself, on the other end, and I've done that quite a few times as well, it's thinking about what they look for, making sure that you're prepared against that job advert, prepared that you've got examples, as it were, of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So, if you're asked a question about some of the things they're looking for, make sure you've got some examples or some ideas about how you'd answer that.
Yeah, again, I think there's parts of job interviews that could be considered quite easy in maybe getting a leg up, like a simple Google search of the place that you're working for, see kind of their morals and values and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. And nobody expects you to have knowledge and understanding of the whole organisation. People that work in that organisation won't have that. So, but I think if you've made the effort and you've tried to do something understanding and you've prepared that, being in an interview process is always about showing your attributes, how you've got the skills, how you've got the abilities to deliver that job, and that's what's key. So if you're comfortable with those yourself, communicating those becomes much easier. So that's part of the preparation, is knowing yourself, understanding and being able to talk about your examples and then set them in what the job advert is asking for.
We were also saying earlier in the podcast that although it can be quite nervous for anyone that is being interviewed, we have to kind of sometimes take a step back and remember that the company that is interviewing is also looking for a new employee, and they obviously want to make time to ensure that the person that they're hiring is the right person that will be the right fit.
Definitely, it's a big investment for an organisation to find the right people that do fit, and it depending on what the organisation is, though for some those hurdles might be higher than for others, but they're hurdles we've all got to pass to get through and secure employment.
Yeah, definitely. So, as we said earlier in the podcast, International Happiness at Work Week is from September the 20th to the 26th. So, Chris, what makes you happy at work?
Right, I'm going to be really simplistic and talk about task, team and individual, because they're all really important in a workplace. So, task, what you're doing, so some of the work that I'm involved in is realistically making life better for some people. It's taking them out of risk and harm and putting them in a better place. So that's what I really enjoy about what I'm doing. Team, so it's about the people you work with. It's about having those relationships, and coming back in the office the last few weeks has been great because I'm actually seeing people in 3D again. So it's nice to do those things we did before and catch up over a coffee and things. So the team that I work with is really good and we get on really well. So that's a big part of it. And then it's individual. It's about you as a person, about what works for you, what you're interested in, what your passions are. And I think if you've got a balance of all those three things, you're going to be happy at work because you'll understand how all those plug together. And when they do, they do. So that for me is sort of the big thing. So probably the big thing for me is about that, what I'm doing, the motivation, about what makes me get out of bed. But then it's not all about that task. It's about the people I work with. It's about me. So combination of those three things.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for all of this insight that you've given us. It was really nice to talk to you.
You're welcome.
That's all for September's episode. Make sure that you join us next month for more employment advice and conversation. Next month, to mark the National Work-Life Week, we'll be talking about work-life balance, as Dan's just said, and how this also fits into job searching. So don't forget to send us your thoughts and comments, and all the contact details that you need are over on accesssouthampton.co.uk/jobcast.